Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode Introduction into Architecture Rendering Methods. And again, this is more as an overview to give you just an understanding of what this all could be about. So, in this session, we will particularly talk about how we can take a model where we place lights and now turn this into a rendering, which we could put into a presentation, upload onto a website, or share. Before we actually do this, I would like to go for a moment and show you what I do in real life with a camera, because everything what I will show you here is kind of like the same way how I practice photography in real world. And here you can see I'm inside the camera. So first thing now, logically, what I will do with a camera is move around and try to find a good location. Maybe a little bit closer. What about how does this look when you look up, down? Okay. Maybe further away. Maybe use a different lens, so I zoom in more. And then we have to think about also exposure. Do I expose for the inside, maybe the monkey, or do I expose for the outside? And you see if I expose for the outside, the inside is very dark. And if I expose for the inside, the outside is very bright. And then after I took a photo, we will do what everybody loves to do with Instagram photos, add filters and color corrections to it. Because the photo I would photograph is not really what actually I would show. I would adjust the colors to create a nice tone. So to summarize, essentially everything what I did with the iPhone was I used my iPhone to treat it like a camera, find a position. Then I tried to expose the image for the inside or the outside. And then in the end, after I took a photo, I adjusted the colors and applied a filter. Okay, so what's missing in the scene? We do not have any camera. Let's do this. So I will go to this view. I will turn these things on because I had those turned off, and we need to find a camera. Well, we don't have one. Let's add one. Add, and then camera. There we are. Use the camera in my view. I will reset that position. I will set this to 0, tab, 0, tab, 0. The rotation I will set to 0, tab, 0, tab, 0. Very good. And then I move the camera to here, move this up, and let's zoom in a little bit. And shows you basically how this icon looks like. This triangle means that is kind of like, well, up. So essentially, the camera looks onto the ground this way because this is well above our head. Okay, but I want the camera to look to there. So how can I do this? First, in relationship to my model, I can rotate this along the z-axis. So here I click and drag, and can also type in 90 degrees. And then the x-axis, I will rotate to 90 degrees. So here's actually already one really big thing. We do not want cameras to look up or look down because then we have terrible vertical lines. That is really aesthetically not pleasing in interior photography or architecture photography. And there's a different tool to uh, make use of that. Okay, so there is now the lens. I will go and say here, right click and slice horizontal. And then here, right click, slice vertical. And in here, I will press N, so this is gone. Press T, so this is gone. And then I click onto the camera icon. And it goes into the camera view. Very nice. So now we are going to set up all the camera stuff. First, I would like to get rid of everything I do not see inside my frame. Okay, let's go to the camera. And then we will go to viewport display. This is the viewport. And passport 2, we click and slide. Maybe 0.9, nope, 0.95, 0.99, 0.98. Okay, now I can barely see the surrounding. That's very good. Okay. How do we adjust actually the format of an image? So we could go to render setting. No, it's actually in document setting. So this is 1920 by 1080. So this is actually 1080p, so HD for TV. if this should be for a rendering for a document and we have a particular size, let's say 4 inches by 4 inches, we need to figure out how many pixels fit into 1 inch horizontally and 1 inch vertically, or 2 inches vertically. So what we will do here right now to show you what is going on is what happens when we set this to 1000? What happens when we set this to 500? You see how the relationship actually changes. So this is just only a proportional representation of how this would look. Okay, I would like this camera to show all of the space. So you see I slide this up, slide this back. Okay, now I would like to see the sides. Okay, so I need to adjust the format. You see, I need to move this a little bit further back. Mouse wheel zoom in. And oh, look at that. I'm getting really close. Maybe a little bit left and right. When I hold the shift key, when dragging, it drags it much, much slower. 500, 550. Okay. Now I have a nice empty frame also around. Cool. Okay. So this is, for example, the frame of the camera. Two more interesting things. So for those who are also familiar with photography, with a camera on the body, you also put lenses in front. We can go into like a super crazy zoom lens, 200%, 200 millimeters, and you see this nearly looks like really flat. Look how short this wall looks. Okay, when we set this to 15, well, this is really far away. Let's get really close and oh, this looks like a beginner perspective drawing where everything is too deep or too wide. So this is like a wide angle lens, way too distorted. For interior photography or also product photography, something between 50 to 90, I find actually visually to be kind of like a good balance between not too flat and not too, yeah, Star Wars, no, not Star Wars, Star Trek, warped, distorted. Okay, good. Another very interesting thing, because this covered kind of like the zoom or like the tele or wide lens. What about I would like to see more of the upper area. So I move the camera down, but then this image is really on top. This is empty. How can I move this one down? Again, what I do not want to do is I do not want to rotate my camera because then as you can see, I get distorted vertical edges. How do I move all this stuff down? Well, here we have a shift. And there with the shift command, I can simply move this up and down without any perspective distortion. That's interesting. Just so you know, this is actually possible. So all the tools a photographer would use actually in real life photography, I have here at my disposal. And also here again, holding shift when sliding numbers makes it move in really small steps. Very good. There's obviously more. We can even add actually a depth of field to it. So we focus on this part. There's even a clipping, so we can clip through walls, which is actually really funny. Maybe the clipping I quickly show so you understand also where 3D rendering can provide interesting tips or not tools real world photography does not have. So I will show the limit. You see there is now this yellow piece and I can drag this to there. And that's actually the focus. So everything on this plane later I can set to be in focus, and in front and back will be out of focus. And then there's this really long orange line. What is this line? This is the clipping start and the clipping end. And the clipping we have here. Let's set this to 20 feet and 25 feet. Oh, our model is gone. No, it's not really gone because when I zoom in, look here, this is actually what's visible. And that's outside the visibility, and this is outside the visibility. So when I start scrolling this, we will, there's our model. And I can do the opposite too. You see? Pretty cool. So that's how you can do very quickly cut sections, or you can look through a wall into a space for rendering purpose. And then here, this we will extend to the end. Okay, good. Let's keep it at this. Yeah, so we have set up the document format. We have positioned our camera. Let's mouse wheel. I can roll and scroll actually this interface. I will start the rendering here. Okay, nice. I would like to put this later into a presentation, but instead of having everything black and this window black, I would like to see this being, well, transparent, because I would like to see the white paper behind there. So we can go to the render setting, and then we go to film, and we click on transparent. And you see now that all this is shown as a checkerboard. That means that's transparent. So when I load this into Photoshop, Illustrator, Affinity Designer, Factonator, or whatever, that area will be transparent when I export as a PNG. That's important, not JPEG. JPEG is a big no-no. Okay, so yeah, the next thing, exposure. How can we expose? Now this is a little bit different how this is treated here, but we can do exactly the same here too. We have kind of like filters, and we have the ability to expose and balance out the lighting, make sure that overexposed areas are not overexposed, and such. So we have something called color management, tone mapping. Again, in the video I showed you with the camera, that is what I later did when I adjusted the colors. So you see, the steps are really the same. And a lot of programs, what I do here right now manually, they, for example, do this automatically, like an auto contrast adjustment, an auto brightness adjustment, kind of like simulating if you go into a garage, which is dark, your pupils need to expand so you can see more. And then when you go to the outside, your eyes adjust to the outside brightness. And this is kind of quite nice when the programs can do this on purpose automatically, but sometimes the results are also, well, computer generated, and you can see that. So it's better if you really know how to do this manually, and you know what you have to look for. So in this program, for example, like again, in all programs they do that, Photoshop too, we have something for the exposure. So we can make the whole thing brighter. We have something for the gamma. So add contrast, for example, to it. Set this to 0 here. And then we have something called like looks. Filmic is actually the one that's on default. And I will set this to standard here right now. And when I zoom in, you can see how bright this really is with standard. And when I go to Filmic, you will see, looks a little bit more flat, but the lights do not look so artificially, yeah, this is too bright, no? Because that's not the way I would look, for example, in film. Filmic, that's the reason, the name for it. And then we have what's called looks, different contrasts, like low contrast, no contrast. And look how the colors also adjust a little bit. No? Okay. This is also a good point here to, or an example to show why when you do a rendering, we're not really redoing something that's physically accurate. We are creating an emotion, a story we would like to say. And that's the same also with the photos. If you make a photo with your Android or your iPhone, the photo could be good, but then adjusting the colors a little bit makes it pop more. But then we make this photo look different than the reality already was. So we do the same in rendering too. Okay, very good. And for the Photoshop people, there's also even something called with curves. So you can click on the curve, and now we can create an S curve if we would like to. So darks, we make it tick darker. So add more contrast. And brights, we make it tick brighter. And you see how actually we brought in a nice amount of contrast, for example. Very small changes can have a significant amount of change. Very good. Okay, yeah. So I will stop the rendering here because we could say this is all done. So we positioned our camera nicely. We set up our color adjustment. So now we know how, when we will render, how that image will look. Okay, how do we do the rendering? We have this also set up. Let's go to render. And there is my initial rendering. And there are a lot of things that are kind of funny. What's going on here? Where's all this extra stuff coming from? That's good this happened. When I go back to here for the moment, you see here a camera and a display. These are so-called render flags. And I have this point, and the sun visible. I do not want this, and this to actually show up in my rendering. And let's do another rendering there. You see? Perfect. Okay, that's exactly the way how it should look like. I can make a 25% rendering of this image, like a quick view, zoom done. Or I can make an image that is bigger. And obviously, if we make it bigger, it takes more time to render. There are some artifacts, kind of like some blotches. In the first video, when we looked into rendering, I set up some samples, and I mentioned I will explain this later. And we can go back to here and then go to sampling and render. And instead of 10, let's say 50. And think about this, 50 times the software in 50 steps is allowed to draw via dots this image. So when we now do a rendering, you can see there's a noise. And every time of another sample, this noise gets actually cleaner and cleaner and cleaner till when it's done. You see now the noise is finer. When it's done with the 50 samples, then it will filter it out and clean it up. More samples, the longer it takes, but the cleaner the image. When we go maybe really brutal, let's say 2 samples and render. I must have missed, oh, I must have clicked actually on the wrong button here. There, 2 samples. Let's do this one more time. There, very fast. Took 2 seconds, but it looks terrible. But actually, it is, as a preview, okay. Now, this is now something that took 11 seconds. Still not really long. But if you have to make 10, 60 of those, you're looking at 1-2 minutes. If a rendering takes 1 minute and you have to make 10, then you look at 10 minutes. So very quickly you can see how render time can accumulate. So what I wanted to show you with this here, this is really like a very quick preview when we would put this, for example, into a layout or discuss ideas. And then this is something we would do when we want to show something that's more refined. So there's a process in rendering. So this image I would like to save. Save as, go to desktop, and RGB, A, and PNG. Really important. I will call this rendering. There you are. And then I will go to just a program here called Factonator. You can use whatever program. This is a small one, free on the Mac, and it's an easy tool to do some basic things. So here I will import actually this image. And there it is. And now I zoom in a little bit, and you see there's this checkerboard again, and I will tell the software, show me the background being white. So now when I select actually this image, and when I turn this on and off, you can see how this is actually different. I will draw just a different shape. and then here drag this behind. And there you see, there's actually now a different fill right behind it. So I could, for example, find a nice scenery, environment, city photo or something and put this behind this window, and then I would have this illusion of, oh, I'm actually inside this environment, landscape inside the city. So this is all completely photo montaged. Very good. This basically is everything what I wanted to show in this very quick video, so you can understand how, based on photography tools we would use in real life, we would set up our camera. Then we can set up all these lights. The render flags here will come very useful when we have different lights and we want to say render set A, render set B, render during the day, render during the night, switch to a different camera. We also looked into how to adjust colors and color management, and then render it out as an image, save it as PNG, and place it in a presentation. Perfect.